Okay, so as we mentioned, we're taking a look at our literacy rich classroom. Here's a screenshot of our Padlet if you haven't been to it yet. There should be everything that you need to participate in the workshop today, as well as resources if you want to check them out later. Okay, so specifically, we're going to delve into creating a responsive and caring classroom, really looking at structures and routines we can put in place to give our students multiple opportunities to engage with literacy um, and appropriate instruction throughout the day with lots of different ways to do that at many different levels. So really looking at learning as a social activity that we can do. We talked a lot about, or you're talking about a lot of experimentation with learning so that we have the freedom to try things out and notice what's going to make us progress farther. And just really noticing like how learning is learning to read, learning to ride a bike, learning all of those different things often requires similar aspects. Often it requires some direct instruction, some gradual release of responsibility, which is kind of like the scaffolding that Lisa talked about with the water wings. Having that time for encouragement, as I mentioned with my grandfather, it was always very positive. It wasn't like, stop, you're going to hit a tree, but very positive language, motivating and engaging, because there's often that sense that we want to learn the new skill. So we're quite engaged with that. Excellent. Okay. Lots of driving today. That's great. Lots of driving examples. Lisa, do you want me to keep going or?
Yeah, I can take over.
Okay.
If you don't mind. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I think there's one more reveal here, but I can.
Oh, sorry. Here, let me do that.
Okay.
I'll close that up while you're getting ready. So with this in mind, what we're really looking at today is creating that environment for our students to feel safe, to feel like they can take some risks, to feel like they're learning in a social construct and learning from others as well as learning themselves, and teaching others. So really looking at those relationships. We're going to talk a lot about building community, trying out new things, and having a sense of responsibility for learning today.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I really love this analogy and how important those relationships are when we are learning. So who are we learning with? Who are we learning from? Do we feel safe and seen and supported? And that really is such an important piece of the social emotional groundwork that needs to be there, that fertile, rich environment so that learning can take place. Many of you maybe have seen it. It's probably about 10 years old, but there's a really fabulous TED Talk by an educator named Rita Pearson. And the quote from that will always stick with me is she said, kids won't learn from someone they don't like. So if you don't start by building relationships with your students first and figuring out how to connect with them and what to connect with them about, the learning it's an obstacle to their learning because they don't have the connection and don't have that bond. So that always stuck with me. And I think about this. I was the same as Jen in that my parents taught me to drive, and it was like the worst fights we ever had. When my younger sisters turned 16, they were enrolled in Young Drivers of Canada. So they turned it over to the experts with my sisters. So just kind of a funny analogy. So thinking about that environment, think about the engagement and the motivation we all had, learning how to ride a bike, learning how to swim, learning how to drive. Those are all activities that we were excited about, that we wanted to do, our friends were doing. It gave us more freedom, something fun to do, independence. And so the motivation was there. It was intrinsic. It was built in. We want to help nurture that motivation and the engagement with our students with all of these literacy experiences. So when we're opening up their world and developing their skills as readers and writers, So much of that is us finding ways to spark the joy and make things fun and engaging and interactive for them. So anything that we can turn into a game, fabulous, which is a really nice thing about literacy centers. Word ladders is something you can do. It really does feel like a game, but they're doing some deep level word solving and critical thinking. We can do this together as a class, as a whole class, to model it a few times, do that direct instruction, model, demonstrate. This then could be part of our routines we did as a nice 5-minute filler when we've got a little bit of time. I used to invite my students to make their own word ladders, their own clues. And then they could, if they had free time, they could find a partner and they could give each other their word ladders and try them out. So there's some social learning happening as well, and they're getting a chance to practice. This makes a really nice literacy center too. And it's quite differentiated. So if you're just working with 3-letter words or 4-letter words, great. This one, because it's grade 2, 3, the way we've set it up, it's got some clues as well. So it's a little bit more like a series of riddles, I guess. So you can feel free, enter into the chat box what your guesses are as we go here. So the first clue, I eat today, but yesterday I ate. So that's the first word in our word ladder. And now we're going to change that in some way. So feel free, just keep adding in the chat box. So this one, it's an outdoor doorway. You add 1 letter to 8. And we've got gate. The opposite of early. So we're going to change 1 letter in gate, and that will become plate. See, it's fun even for adults, isn't it? So it's like, I know our kids will have fun with this. Another word for partner. So change 1 letter again. You can see we're starting out quite simple with simple substitutions. We've got mate. A type of carpet used for wiping shoes. So take away 1 letter. And we've got mat. So it's a little bit of a gear shift here. Short form for the names Patrick or Patricia. So we're going to change 1 letter. We've got Pat. A domesticated animal that lives with people, such as a dog or a cat. Change 1 letter. So we'll focus in on that vowel. We've got pet. An untanned hide of an animal, also to throw objects at someone or something. Add 1 letter. This is advanced. This is tricky, but that's a pelt.
Ooh. I don't think anyone got that one.
And now ice will blank when the temperature is above 0 degrees. So change 1 letter from pelt. Gets a little easier again. We've got melt. And then finally, I'm going to move my toolbar here so I can see. A large fruit of any of the various plants of the gourd family. I did not know this. So replace the last letter with 2 new letters. So you can see this is pretty advanced even for us legal adults here. We've got melon. So some of this might be a bit hard for our 2, 3s, but some of it is quite easy and you can see how it goes. You could just start with changing the first letter, the last letter, change the vowel, 3-letter words, CVC words. It's a nice way to start. The style where there are clues is a Tim Rosinski specialty. You can see there at the bottom left in the slide on your e-handout and on the Padlet, those links you can go right to and check out. So he has a whole collection of word ladders like this in varying degrees of difficulty for kids of different ages, if you are interested in trying this out with your students. So if we're looking at some of the research on creating a responsive and caring classroom, Purposeful Play is a really lovely book, as well as the first 6 weeks of school. As we all know, the core competencies, SEL, so much of that social emotional piece and the safety and the comfort needs to be in place for students to be able to be successful academically. And so how they learn is as important as what they learn, and that cognitive growth comes through social interaction. So solving differences of opinion and conflict, having time for partner talk, small group talk, whole class things, and then really building in an infrastructure of routines and guidelines to create and reinforce that predictability and the safety that students know what their day is going to look like. They know what's coming next. They know what to expect, just like they know where things are. And they're, everything in the classroom has a place. So book bins, if you have here's where our little tub of erasers is, here's where our paper is, here is where we hand in work, here are literacy centers, here's how we put away books, here's how we line up, all of those things, building in the routine so that it becomes familiar to the students, it's more automatic, and we don't have to waste as much time once those routines are in place, explaining or redirecting students and how they go about their day throughout our literacy block and beyond. So much is about getting to know our kids. Class meetings is a really fabulous way to do that. And then those can launch meaningful and intentional connected reading and writing experiences, either as interactive or shared reading and writing at the carpet as part of a meeting. It can also then be a launching point for things that you offer at centers in your classroom. If you have literacy centers or stations that the kids can rotate throughout your literacy block to focus in on word work or reading or writing or oral language and storytelling, readers theater, those types of things. So part of that foundation being the social emotional piece, the self-regulation, the communication, the relationships, the interpersonal skills, and again, building up the connections and the bond between us and our students and the students with each other so that they get to know each other. So the morning meeting is a really wonderful way to do that. And you can do this really quite quickly, less than 10 minutes. And it really is, especially starting the year in September, it's a wonderful routine to build in that helps to fast track building those connections. And the students can find out the commonalities, the similarities they have with each other, things that other kids are into or good at or like to do that they might be interested in. So they might seek them out later at recess or during free time. Hey, I didn't know you were into Lego. I'm really into Lego too. Let's talk about it. What's the last thing that you built? Or, oh, I play soccer too. What team are you on? It can really help to foster a lot of natural conversations and connections when the kids are all getting to know each other. And some may have been in classes together before, but there's always going to be new kids and kids who haven't been in the same class. So important to help build that up.
So, as Lisa was saying, the morning meeting is a way for us to welcome our students. It can be a short time that we're just connecting with each other and using dialogue to talk, to listen, to notice what's going on with our students. We're going to talk a little bit later on setting up intentional times for whole class discussion and small group conversation. So this works really well to practice those skills that our students are learning. So often the format goes with really greeting, as I mentioned, making students feel comfortable, they belong. How are we going to greet each other? Handshakes, clapping, singing, fist pump, whatever. And doing some sharing of interest, just like we did at the beginning of our time together with how we learned how to ride a bike or swim or drive a car. So all of those ways got us to know a little bit more about each other. And if we were together, of course, that connection would be even more so. But it's a great way to do a short activity as a whole class to start out together and through that active participation. It's also a wonderful way to talk about any news or announcements that's coming up, what's going on in our community. What do we need to remember about today? Or, this week is picture week and what needs to happen. So just setting up the expectation that we are a community that comes together and all voices are valued. Okay, so let's see what this could look like in action. So really looking at that greeting, sharing, group activity, and news. So we talked a lot about that, as I just mentioned, but let's do that again even a little bit further. So think about your favorite memory from summer break, and I'm going to have you pop that into the chat box. This is a great way for us to connect, see what is a positive way that we can learn more about each other. And I'm just going to see, oh, I was wondering if there was a timer there. So we're just pop those into the chat box and we will see what similarities that we have with other people in the room. So we had some camping. Oh, a couple of camping. Wonderful. Oh, Lisa, I have to know more about your trip. I didn't even know that you went on a road trip. That's cool. Wow, Osaka, that's amazing. That is that would be a very cool conversation to know more about what that experience was like. So already you're seeing how we could, if we were in the same room, go over and chat with Rebecca about the beach days in Tofino and what she noticed and what was her favorite part, and camping. Where did you go? What was the weather like? So many ways to connect, even as a whole group. If a student is mentioning that their summer memory was about, camping by the beach, think of the questions that can come up, the listening comprehension that's happening, and also, how we're finding similarities and building that sense of community with other people.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jen. If you want to keep sharing your screen, I can speak to the next few. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if we had more time, the one about sharing your favorite summer memory, as Jen said, if we were together too, it'd be quite easy to build on that. Or what we could do here, and we have done in the past, is read through the chat box, find one person sharing of a destination or an activity they did that really interests you, and then just ask them a question. So yeah, I might ask Raina about camping, where she went camping, if she saw any bears or something like that. So it could facilitate, we can intentionally set up a routine and the structure and activity for students to do that. Again, thinking of the scaffolded support of the training wheels. They need the training wheels even for how to have intentional conversations. And this is a way to do it about things that they've done that they're really excited to talk about. So it's a really nice starting point because they're not having to do a lot of mental heavy lifting to think about what was the main character of the story, what was the conflict in the story, or how do you spell this, or thinking about some sort of math equation or something like that. It's just reflecting on their own life. So again, so important for setting the connections up in the classroom. And then if we shift now to looking at designing the space and the layout in our classroom, and how can we bring in our students to co-design, co-plan, and co-create the learning space that they're going to spend their whole year in. So some examples here, we've got 5 different areas suggested. Having an area for mini lessons, so a rainbow or jelly bean table, if that's possible. Easily accessible areas for diverse abilities, having a quiet, calm, cozy area, having centers or stations, whether that's for literacy or math or just center time, and then how you organize your classroom library. So I'm going to put another timer on and ask you to reflect here or share ways that you already do this, how you involve your students in setting up the classroom environment, zones in your classroom, some of the things, the displays, and that environmental print. We'll talk a little bit more about that next, but we'd love to get your reflections and thoughts and connections and your experience on what works for you or what you're interested in trying and how you can involve your students in setting up the classroom this year. Yeah, that's a good point, Robert. It's kind of so often, so many years, we take this week to go in and set up our classroom again. So there's a lot of it already set up. Good to take into account with the kids, check with them. They might have suggestions for changes or based on who's in your class. Lots of pictures is great. Kids love to see themselves around the room as well. Yeah, any other strategies that work well for you for bringing in your kids? Oh, thanks, Raina. Yeah. So if you can, have a look at the chat box. Yeah, the morning meeting, really nice for the students to have the opportunity and the time to voice their input and their thoughts on what's working well in the classroom for them, as well as maybe what isn't working and other things you could try out, and taking their suggestion. Again, if they're helping to create routines or rules or procedures, their investment then in following them and paying attention to being mindful of them is even more, because they've co-created them rather than the rules being handed down to them. Yeah, different things with their desks. That's wonderful. Flexible seating. Thank you. These are great. So I was just alluding to that, looking at some of the ways that we can think about the text and the print that are in place around our classroom. And there is a lot of research. This information, these come from the Saskatchewan Online Curriculum for Reading Environmental Print. Again, that link there can take you to it if you have the electronic handout. But there's a lot of research that really highlights and reinforces the fact that bringing the students in to help decide and create and place what's around the room is very powerful. And the other piece is it needs to be developmentally appropriate for where they're at right now as readers and writers, as literacy learners. So what's helpful to them right now? So you think of the training wheels. When are training wheels useful for when you're riding a bike? At the beginning of your journey, not so much later on. Maybe later on, what's more important are the brakes, right? So thinking about when to bring things in, maybe you can ease out with some things as you bring in new support. So the environmental print changes. It doesn't stay static throughout the year. So it expands and changes based on what's happening in the school, what they're learning, what their interests are. Maybe if you're working on themes or inquiry units, what's happening in your community. And it's not too overwhelming. So if we're thinking about anchor charts, having students help make them. So even just making labels for book bins or for their hook in the cubby or where they keep their lunch bag, the shape of the day, the agenda. If you've got the words for, math or social studies or science or gym or snack, maybe you could invite the kids to draw the pictures to go with those before they get laminated. So ways we can bring them in. And then same thing with classroom libraries, having discussions. How do we organize the bins? We have fiction, nonfiction, graphic novels, comic books, books about animals. How do we organize them? How do we sort them? And how do we keep them fluid and alive and expanding to have new books in them? So the students know about the libraries, how they're organized, because they've had a say in it. And then that's going to pique their interest in going to read those books when they've got independent or partner buddy reading time. So we're going to take some time here. We're going to give you a couple minutes to draw on any paper you've got, the handout or blank paper, to draw a quick map of your classroom. So sketching in the things that are unmovable, like the door, windows, sink, cubbies, that kind of thing. And then plotting out either what you maybe have already started to set up this week or what you'd like to set up and see in place, thinking about the zones you'd like to have available for your students. So a gathering area, there's some areas for independent, partner, small group work, flexible. And then if you have things like centers or stations for literacy or math, where can those be? And where are the opportunities for some of those anchor charts, environmental print, and things like that? So take a little bit of time to do some sketching and planning and thinking and jotting down what we'd like to see in our classroom based on what's possible with our space and the resources and materials and furniture that we've got. All right, thank you. Yeah, any thoughts or reflections, or what is your favorite zone or area in your classroom? Or what do you think the students' favorite area or zone of your classroom will be? So if you can share something in the chat box, I think we'd all love to see each other's thoughts and connections and experiences. Robert, thank you. Yeah, the real estate on the walls can be really at a premium. It can be hard to find space. Especially, I know I taught in an open concept school designed by Arthur Erickson in Vancouver, and it was lovely and wonderful and very 1970s. And yet, the classroom next door was very loud and boisterous, and it was hard sometimes for us to focus and do quiet kind of learning or focus things. I wished many times for a wall. So yeah, not only did I wish for a wall for some sound buffering, but also that I could, even put the kids' artwork up on, let alone the anchor charts and a word wall and things like that. So space can be really limited. Yeah. Windows and whiteboards are great, but it does limit what we can. Yeah. Taping things up on the back of the door. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I think, do dry erase markers work on windows that you can erase them? I've seen kids working together in partners and doing math. And because of that limited, chalkboard, whiteboard, kids always went and did it at the windows too, which I thought was quite cool. But you want to make sure you're using the right kind of marker so it's not permanent.
Yes, Megan has let us know, yes, that brighter colors are best. Oh, earthquake film. Okay. Well, that's out of my zone of understanding, because I don't live in an earthquake area, but good point.
Yeah, it's true. And so many of those little personal whiteboards now seem to be a lot more common across a lot more classrooms across the province, in my experience, which is also wonderful, because then the kids can just sit in partners or small groups with those as well. So, but it's not so permanent. Yeah. Thank you for sharing those. That's great. Another wonderful gem from the first 6 weeks of school is this, they've got it on offer. We've just recreated it a little bit here, but a hopes and dreams planning sheet. And depending on their writing abilities and their independence at the start of the school year, this might be something you discuss with them as a class and go through the questions and talk about orally. And then it might be something that you send home. And this could be sort of like an interview between the parents and their child to fill this in. If the parents write the answers down, interview their child to ask them about what they enjoyed, what they felt their challenges were, if they have any goals and what they'd like to work on this year. This is really, really wonderful, rich data to have on all of our students. Another way you can get this done quickly is partnering with an older intermediate class to have sort of a buddy class. Hopefully now that we're shifting to things where being together in bigger groups and close together is less problematic, although who knows, hey? But rather than, if they're not really independent writers yet, this would be challenging for you to fill it out on each student, interviewing them one by one. In an ideal world, wouldn't it be nice to sit and have little interviews with them? But not always realistic, and how we're so pressed for time, especially in September when everything is so new. Oh, Rebecca, yes, thank you. The DNA, their dreams, needs, and abilities. I think that's something Tom Hirk uses. Yeah, that's a really wonderful one. So the kids can make bookmarks or posters, and you've got the DNA going down the left, like kind of like an acrostic poem. And they let you know what are their dreams, what do they need, and what are their abilities. So then they can focus on something that they're good at, a strength, and a need is something. It's nice to normalize that we all have needs. So if I need a quiet workspace, if I need extra time, I need to have visuals, I need to listen to you explain things a few times, I need to work with other people in groups, that really helps me. Good for us to know what the students identify in all of those areas. So thinking about ways you could do an inventory for students. I know on our website, we have a reading interest inventory and a writing interest inventory, which asks students, kind of what their interests and abilities, anything they don't like about reading or writing, what types of books, what types of stories, is there anything they find hard? or frustrating about reading and writing, that's another really nice thing to do, to have the parents interview the students in September to get information. It's also nice when the parents get involved because they might see some surprises. They might be surprised that, oh, I didn't realize I had a reluctant writer. I didn't realize my kid hated printing or finds it hard to hold a pencil. Their fine motor is really challenging them. They've got great ideas, but maybe they need a pencil grip, or can they work with another type of writing tool? So nice way to connect the parents and bring them in September as well. And in the second part of the workshop, when Jen is presenting her section, I'll go into the POPEY website and I'll grab those inventories and I'll put them in the chat box for you if anybody's interested in checking out those. They're just printable PDFs. And just like we talked about having the students be involved in helping to plan and decide and create what goes on the walls in our classroom, bringing them in to come up with a set of a contract about classroom goals, to create a contract is very powerful. So it's not something they come in and see that I did up at the end of August. It's on my wall in an anchor chart saying, here are the 5 rules you can't break in my classroom. But we discuss together what are some rules that we can create. We frame them as positive guidelines, things we can put in place so that all of us can reach our goals as easily as possible. So as a class, we could brainstorm that together. I could write them up on the board or chart paper, and then take some time over a week or two, zero in on what we think is the most important. We don't need to have 10 rules, maybe 4, 5, or 6, a manageable amount depending on your kids. And, it would be different for kindies than it would be for grade 3s, I would say. And then we create that contract. They've created it with you, and then the students can sign it. So it can be one piece of paper, one contract, and it's got 20, 24 signatures on it. And they're agreeing to those rules. So thinking about rules for safety, rules for movement, for noise, or having a quiet workspace, how we respect other people, how we respect materials in the classroom, something about trying our best. So, and the rules for I might have a grade 2 class and we create a contract with 5 goals. A grade 2 teacher next door with their class might come up with different goals and a different contract. And so it's really nice that you can tailor it to match your students for what is important to them and what they need to succeed. So we offer that up. That's also something from the first 6 weeks of school. And if you've done something similar to that in any kind of way and something that works well for you, as always, feel free to share that in our chat box so others can benefit and borrow from your great ideas on things that have worked well for you. All right. So this video from Balanced Literacy Diet, she's just talking about how she co-created expectations for the classroom with her students in her classroom. It's a really short video, just about 1.5 minutes, and she just walks through how she set this up. Isn't that great? Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, Jen, I don't know that I had seen before in any of my decade plus in the classroom where there were expectations for the teacher that the kids had created. I thought that was really cool. And I loved that the first one was be kind. And it was to make sure, another one was to make sure all the kids learn and to include all of the kids' interests. They know what they need.
I was going to say the exact same thing, Lisa. Just really appreciate that community building that involves the teacher as well, for sure. Okay, so just to follow up with that and thinking about how we're building community and creating those expectations. So one way that we can really reinforce it with our students is to have positive teacher language around behaviors that's specific and really points out that noticing and nurturing of that behavior. So some examples are, as students arrive, you can say, Robert, I saw you help Maggie out with her backpack. That was kind. So using the language that came out of the expectations in our dialogue with students. During math, Manuel, you look ready for our math activity. Your eyes are on me and your hands are still. So again, just really emphasizing the behavior that is creating like a positive working environment for everyone. And before a transition, class, we're about to transition from the circle area to table groups. What are some of our ideas of how we can move safely? You can try this out. Let's see how Manuel shows us how he can move safely from the table area, circle area to the table groups. So that positive teacher language that is so important in classroom management. Okay, so as we're talking about creating this place of belonging for our students, we talked a lot about the sense of safety and joy and belonging at the beginning of our workshop today when we were thinking about that morning message and creating that space for our students to be learners where they feel like they can take risks and have that sense of belonging. Now, when we think about supporting a classroom of talkers and listeners, it means we need to be really intentional about what that looks like. Our students need a lot of practice, especially I would say after the last couple of years with pandemic, because we avoided social situations. I mean, even for myself, when I'm in a group of people now, I have to check myself, like, am I saying, is this whole dialogue thing going appropriately? Because for so long we didn't have that. So think of our littles who didn't have the chance to learn those skills in kindergarten and grade 1. Now they're in grade 2 and grade 3, and we're teaching a lot of dialogue skills and communication. So giving them a balance of, different ways that they can practice partner talk and small group talk and whole class talk, that focuses in on honoring the person who's talking, but also the people who are listening and what that looks like. Okay, so having intentional conversations is super important in so many different learning ways. So we're just going to talk a little bit more about what that can look like in whole class discussions and why it's so important. But first, thinking about those intentional conversations, we also need our students to know that we are valuing their voice, their opinions, and their thoughts and their ideas. Staying away from yes or no answers, which, sometimes if that was maybe easiest when you were learning online and things like that, to kind of focus on a yes or no response. But now we need to show them that we want to value what their thoughts are, and we want them to tell us the reasons why. So some fun questions that we can play around with just to try this out. Choose one question or statement and respond with your opinion and reason why, or agree, disagree, and the reason why. So we're going to do this all together. These are fun questions, lovely to answer and to get us ready for the next activity that we're going to be doing or looking at. So you have a minute here to answer in the chat box one of your opinions and why. Okay, so we have some people. So Robert wants to go on a mountain holiday. Wonderful idea. Dogs over cats. Okay, my dog does everything I do. Aw, but cats are so independent. I'm kind of a cat person myself, but I get you. Yes, there. See, Raina agrees with me. Okay, so fun way to engage our students in things that practicing opinions and reasoning that don't have, a right or wrong answer is a super great way that we can engage our students. So one of the ways that we're going to zone in on right now, this is specifically more of a whole class discussion, is the idea of a hands down conversation. There is a wonderful book, I think it's referenced on the next page, Hands Down, Speak Up. And it really talks about how we can structure a kind of conversation like this. And I agree that we can, sorry, I was reading the chat box. I'll focus on my thought. So how we can structure to engage our students and scaffold that learning for them. But first, backing up a little bit to a short history of hand raising. Absolutely, hand raising is important. It's a good sense of management. It's good for ensuring that students are listened to and that we get to know when they want to speak. But generally, it has been a teacher who initiates a question and a student that responds, and then the teacher evaluates right or wrong. So that's kind of like going into the very basic idea of hand raising. It's also not very authentic if we think about conversations in the real world. Generally, we don't, sometimes, I mean, educators are kind of used to raising their hand, but as we have social conversations, we need to teach our students how to have those authentic conversations with others. Okay, so the detriment, I guess, to the idea of hand raising is that there's the evaluative part where a teacher basically says right or wrong. But what we notice is it's a detriment because what we notice about participation in classroom conversations is it's generally dominated by higher socioeconomic level and higher achievement level. So whose voice are we not hearing in that classroom, in those classrooms? So it's really important that we can structure environment that students feel safe and comfortable to offer their opinions in a way that they feel a sense of belonging, that they're not going to be judged. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so what is a hands down conversation? Basically, there's no hand raising, and this is hard for students to get used to, but remember, we're really scaffolding this as teachers and leaders of this. So what we want them to do instead is listen for a place to slide their voice into the conversation. That's a real world skill. One voice at a time, more or less. Again, a real world skill that I don't think my husband's family has learned yet, but they're working on it. And we want to listen closely to the person who's speaking so that we can engage with that person, answer, rather than just thinking about waiting for a time to talk. We want it to be a back and forth kind of dialogue. Okay, so for instance, we could have on the whiteboard or wherever, and as students come in the morning, something like snakes are dangerous. Put your name tag or write your name if you disagree, if you're neutral about it, or if you agree. Then later on, during a hands down conversation or a morning meeting, which could be another place to practice this, you could say, oh, wow, Lisa, I noticed that you agree that snakes are dangerous. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Why do you think that? And get students started with sharing their opinions and ideas. We could have a T-chart. Video games are bad for kids. Video games are good for kids. Write your name around underneath which one you agree with. And then you have a little bit of time to think of your reasons why before we have the hands down conversation. Okay, so what does this look like? So basically, as a teacher, our job is to take the position either as part of the circle, an equal part, not leading the discussion or the conversation, or sometimes when our students get really used to this hands down conversation format, we can step outside and do a lot of observing. And this is really good information for us to have about our students. And I'll talk a little bit more about that with conversation mapping. But basically, what we want our students to learn how to do is to make that space for social conversation and to notice what's happening with the dynamic of the conversation. So you can gently nudge students by saying things like, Sadie's trying to get her voice in. Someone can invite her in by asking her what she thinks. Real world application of that skill, right? Now, when we get to the point where we can listen with intention and curiosity and notice what is happening with our students, we can draw a little conversation map. All this entails is basically drawing a quick circle map of where your students are in the circle, just with their names. And then just map out the conversation, like I tried to do here with stick figures. So who's getting a lot of the conversation play? Who's talking a lot? Who is having ideas? Who's asking questions? Who's not talking at all? And the beauty of this is that it's very important assessment for you and data for you to hold on to, but it's also really important to share this conversation map with the students and ask them, this is what I noticed, or this is, what I saw, observed during our conversation today. What does it tell you? And after weeks of noticing this, our students are going to notice that Sadie's not talking very much and invite her into the conversation. Students are going to notice that they're talking a lot, and they're, ideally going to start letting people into the conversation. So it's a really authentic way to invite our students into what conversations can look like and what we can do there. Okay, so this is a short video of a teacher setting up a hands down conversation by scaffolding some of the language that they're going to be using. I really appreciate how she explained the reasoning, why it was important to share your reason with the students, so that they got to know the purpose behind having this kind of conversation and why it's important for them to speak their opinions. Okay, so thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, hands down conversations are really kind of a cool idea. And like I said, there's a great book out there by, I can't remember who it's by at the moment, but it's called Hands Down, Speak Up. Okay, we're going to start with live bits. If you do not know Little Miss Live Bits, well, you're in for a treat. But today is kind of a serious topic, because what we're going to be thinking about is how can we create our classroom community so that we grow as a community together, but how do we celebrate our students' their uniqueness and their interests and their diverse abilities in ways that make them want to show up and be who they are. So she's going to talk a little bit about a serious topic of stereotypes, but it's going to lead us into an activity that we're looking at next. So excellent points. And yes, she is quite amazing. She has her own channel, or what would you say? She has her own website, I guess. So she has lots of different little videos about different books that she endorses and different ideas that she has. So you can definitely check her out at thelivebits.com. But her point is really valid, and it is something that we want to create, that welcoming community for all of our students to be who they are and to celebrate who they are, and not feel like they need to change because they're in a classroom community. So we're going to take a look at another book here, Looking Like Me, and think about how you could use this book as a read aloud with your students to celebrate uniqueness, to think about all the different parts of who we are that make us special. And then we'll do an activity with it. Just listen to that book forever and watch the pages and notice different things every time. Just, I'm fascinated by it. Okay, so we are going to do an activity thinking about all of the different unique parts about each of us. So in a moment, I'm going to have you draw an outline of your hand, wherever you'd like, on the back of your handout, just a random piece of paper. And I'm going to have you answer the following questions. So what is a dream of yours? How do other people describe you? What is something interesting you learned but not at school? What is something you're really good at? What do you do for fun in your free time? And finally, you can make an I am jam, just like was suggested by the author of the book. So I'll give you an example of what this could look like, and then I'll bring back this page so that you can do the activity. So this is a quick one that I did for myself. So a dream of mine, I think it was, to learn Italian. words that people use to describe me: kind, smart, quiet, driven. Something I learned, but not at school. My grandma taught me how to knit. Something I'm really good at. I'm really good at listening. And what do I do for fun? Read books, kayak, swim. So I am a wife, sister, daughter, teacher, presenter, friend, researcher, reader. So that's just a quick one to give you an idea. And I will bring this back up so you have the questions in front of you here. And I'm going to give you, only 90 seconds. So you're going to have to think fast. Don't worry if you don't get it all finished, but just do what you can. And then we'll come back together and do a quick activity with that information. Okay, so another takeaway, hopefully for today, if you were going to do something like this with your students, then you already have your template made for what makes you unique as a person, and how wonderful for your students to learn, what's something interesting you learned but not at school, and what do you do for fun in your free time, to really connect and build those relationships with your students as part of the community. Okay, so I think we're going to just chat about this for a moment, but it's something that you could take away and do on your own if you feel like it, just for time's sake. So the I am jam, which I just love that concept of all the different things that we are to all different people, and what makes us unique. So really thinking about this book that we just read together, Looking Like Me. One idea that we have to move forward, if you'd like to do this with your students, is you could write a short poem modeled after the ideas in the book. So my mom calls me, a dreamer, and all of those different things to model some poetry writing that our students can explain and use the information perhaps that you just wrote on the hand to then put it into some poetry and extend that even farther. And it's just such a great activity to help educators and students get to know each other better, and wonderful get to know you at the beginning of the year activity. So we were going to do that, and I was going to show you this really great video, but we're going to move on because it's getting a little late in the day. Okay, so another way that we can think about as we're thinking about enriching literacy experiences for our students is moving outside of our classroom walls. So we talked a lot about creating our classroom environment, about designing our classroom, about engaging our students by sharing their uniqueness into a sense of belonging. But we can do that also outside of the doors of our classroom. And I know so many of you do so much outdoor learning that this is just such a natural fit. But if you think about how we engage our students through identifying, sketching, labeling, all of the different things that we see in our environment, having them notice through observation, through forest walks, and then using that information to then take back to the classroom or to, have enhanced our language comprehension, thinking about the attributes of what we're seeing and thinking about describing words and thinking about questions. What do we wonder about what we're seeing? What does it make us think of? So all sorts of different things that are literacy rich activities that can be done outside of our classroom and really engage our students further. So I had the opportunity to take a forest walk with some students in the spring. And what I noticed, what I observed as an outsider, was the amount of social comprehension that was happening. So how the students were discussing different things with each other, testing out theories, collaborating, making through play, through drama, through story workshops. So all those different wonderful things that students were doing outside of our classroom walls. And it was their favorite time of the week, this forest walk that they got to engage with every Tuesday afternoon, rain or shine. Okay, now thinking about how we can use a read aloud to really help our students to notice the different things around them. So this, if you were in our session this morning, we had this beautiful book called Goodbye Summer, Hello Autumn. This is a heavier topic and a more interesting, or an interesting book that you could really go so deep with your students. And I'll let you listen to it and think about the concepts that are being uncovered, maybe from like a social emotional learning kind of standpoint, and also start thinking about all the beautiful, noticing all the beautiful things around you. Oh, it's such a touching story. It's, the whole idea that books should be mirrors and windows, and thinking about our students and how comforting it could be to hear a story like that, they might relate with their own family situation. So again, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but one thing I would invite you to do, maybe today, maybe, with your students, but think about the 10 beautiful things that Lily and her gram found on their journey. And it wasn't, I really love that phrase of, we're not looking for pretty, we're not looking for perfect, we are looking for beautiful. And what they found was such different beautiful things in their world. So you can take a search and record walk around your environment and write down as many beautiful things that you can find. Record them on a notepad or take photos. And then we are going to have a little share out, but due to time, we won't be able to do that. But what a wonderful way to have your students notice and do some writing, and you can have some poetry, there could be some drawing, you could do so many wonderful things with that story in this way.
I think of connecting that, Jen, to the forest and the nature walks that you talked about earlier, and that building that up to be a routine of, we have 20 minutes to go outside and just explore the school grounds, or maybe you've got, some trees or forest nearby or a park, and have that be the goal of each, little walkabout is, can we each find 10 beautiful things? And whether they sketch them or write them down or share it with a buddy, like what a lovely routine that really reinforces that slowing down and noticing.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Lovely.
And then, yeah. And noticing like change of season and how beauty changes. Absolutely. Lots of really cool things you could do there. Thank you. Okay. And the last kind of thing that we're going to talk about today, which we can't talk about having a literacy rich environment without talking about books. So I'm going to zone in a little bit on independent reading, because there's so much we could talk about, the beauty of books and all the different ways that we can read with students and all of that kind of stuff. But that we'll just focus in on independent reading a little bit for today. So some of the different principles of independent reading, or impactful independent reading, that's what I'm going to say, are time, choice, talk, and teacher support. And we're going to look a little bit more at each of those. But basically, what we want to remember is that it's important for us to give enough time for our students to engage with the independent reading and to practice all of those skills and strategies that they have been learning during reading time, during small group instruction, however you're engaging your students in all of that important stuff. And also having choice. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about choice in the next slide, because I think that needs to be heavily guided and scaffolded. That sometimes we, as adults, we know about choice. We've been choosing books our whole life, and sometimes students don't have that same that same opportunity, or they haven't had, they haven't practiced that enough. So that can be scaffolded a little bit. And then the importance of talk time. So when we think about independent reading, or I think about how I grew up independently reading, it was just me at my desk reading my book. And the importance of having that time for us to talk with other people about our book, about shared interest with the book, about, what we're noticing, but just time to have that social comprehension is so important to solidify ideas, think about things differently, perspective taking, and as well as really working on that language comprehension piece as well. So simply giving students time to read is not the same as independent reading. It needs to be a conscious collaboration between teachers and students. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But this is from a really good book called Trusting Readers, and emphasizing that it is not a time, it is not a free time to just read and have our students go ahead and read and give, have that. We're very much involved in that process as readers. So volume is the key volume of reading is key to growth. So that is why we need lots of time to make sure that we are encouraging that reading and that our students have time to independently read and work on practicing all those skills and strategies. So putting it into your day plan first, not as an afterthought, not as when we have 10 minutes extra at the end of the day, but this needs to be prioritized so that our students see how important it is that we are specifically having a independent reading time in our classroom and valuing that time. So working with choice, we want our students to be able to choose what they read, but we, as I mentioned, often need to have some class discussions around how that works, what we need to consider. We can advertise books, we can have students advertise books. We can, read the first page of a book and say, this book is available for independent reading time today. If the first page intrigued you, then, it might be something that is worthwhile. We can have them, we can suggest, oh, if you really like that book that we read aloud today, you'll probably like this one as well. So we need to start giving them that language of choosing books that they're interested in and that they want to continue to read. Again, I talked about the purposeful talk time being so important. And then teacher support. So feedback is one of the most impactful tools we have for raising student achievement. That's directly from John Hattie's work on visible learning. That feedback is incredibly, incredibly important for our students to move forward and progress with us along the side. So that can be generally when there's independent reading time, that is the time for us to be doing a ton of conferring, small group work, taking notes, teaching points here and there. So it's a very active collaboration time. Okay, just gonna check the time. Okay, perfect. So the last thing, I said that was the last thing I was gonna have you do, but this is really the last thing I'm gonna have you do. 5-minute fillers. So impactful, meaningful 5-minute fillers that are really going to boost that literacy-rich environment in your classroom. What can that look like in your classroom? So when we all have 5 extra minutes here and there, but having a list even at the side of our desk where we can quickly glance at it and say, oh yeah, let's do I Spy with My Little Eye, something that rhymes with bat, or some interactive writing, or let's do a retell of the read aloud that we did earlier. What happened first in that story? What happened next? We can do some word wall I Spy, sound wall I Spy, thinking about looking at the environmental print in our room and engaging with it. And then even just some simple vocabulary development. Who can think of a more interesting word than interesting? And just throw it out there and have that as, a quick vocab lesson. So I know that everyone has 5-minute fillers. I would love to hear yours so that we can share them and perhaps have like a communal list, add to our collection, our tricks and tips. So if you could, in the next minute, write down one 5-minute filler that you use in your classroom or your role, and let's do some sharing. Okay, fantastic. If you are still writing, please continue. Wonderful idea. Robert, tell us one thing you learned today. And then Megan talking about, I'm thinking of a word that starts with Rhymes with? What is that word? Taking guesses? Absolutely. Keep them coming. We're going to keep going. Okay, and as a quick closing activity, we know that September is a tough month, that it is a long month, but I want what we invite you to do today is think about something you want to remind yourself of, that you want to remind yourself at the end of September. So when we're feeling a little tired, when, maybe a little overwhelmed, what's something that you want to open up on September 29th and think, yes, okay, that's going to like get me through that, or that's going to, inspire me, or whatever it is, whether it's just like breathe, if that's your letter, that's okay. So a quick 1 minute to do that. And okay, remember to label that September 29th and open it on that day. Okay, we had so many great learning opportunities this afternoon. We talked about the morning meeting, designing those learning spaces, creating classroom expectations, intentional conversations, and then all of those literacy activities as well. Think about something that you'd like to try. I'm not going to put on the timer because we're running out of time here, but maybe there's something that you want to try. Feel free to pop it into the chat box or just remind yourself. This is the resources that we used to build your workshop today. If anything looks interesting, check it out. And we just so appreciate you being here with us before even school starts. I know this is your special time. We really appreciate it and want you to have the best start to the year, and keep in touch. So we'll say goodbye. If you want to watch the final video, it's just a cute little one. Feel free to stick around. But yes, good luck with everything.